completely shutting off ads on Amazon.
We're completely shutting it off. It made a lot of people mad. It was interesting to see how that resonated with different people. We were growing despite advertising. If we're advertising just to go out of stock, well, that's not incremental sales because you're missing out on organic sales while you're out of stock. And we have been strapped for cash this entire time. We view our advertising budget more as an investment of capital than something that we have to do. So we could spend on Amazon advertising, we could invest in more products, we could launch new products, we could hire more people, we could buy machinery. There were better investments during that time. Our ad budgets did not fully correlate to increases or decreases in revenue. And we didn't fully understand branded search versus competitor versus generic, and spending in a way where not just like Amazon ads is going to give you great performance numbers, but you see it in like average sales. That's what led up to us making a decision to let's just see what happens when we don't do it at all.
Welcome back. I'm here with Bryan Porter, who is one of the co-founders of Simple Modern. You may have heard them. They're quite a thing on Amazon, and he is the Chief E-commerce Officer, and I am so excited for this conversation. Even though you're going to hear through this and what we're going to be talking through on the subject is kind of in opposition to what I do as a leader of an Amazon advertising agency, but I think it's a really important to kind of see all aspects of even what we do as a business. And so I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, I super appreciate you coming on. I'd love to start with just maybe giving a little background on you, and for maybe those of you who haven't been really knee-deep in the brand on Simple Modern. I definitely follow Bryan on LinkedIn. He puts out some amazing content, really honest and open about what they're doing. But for the listeners just joining in, do you mind giving us some context on just how you all started and maybe a overview of what that looked like?
Sure thing. Our brand is called Simple Modern. We sell primarily adult and kids drinkware. Vacuum insulated drinkware is our best seller and where people are most likely to have experienced our product, although we sell textiles as well, like kids backpacks. We're evolving into being a family brand, making products for young families. We are licensed with Disney, the NFL, NBA, all the pro sports leagues. We started in 2015. So the genesis of the company is really my co-founder, Mike Beckham, and we have a third co-founder, Micah Ames. We worked together previously at a business called Quibids, and it was a website that was an auction model. It was e-commerce, a different type format, and we essentially used digital advertising to really scale the business up very quickly, and that was back in 2010. And the TLDR is that advertising got more expensive, and so that became less of an advantage for us, and our LTVs were not good enough. We experienced e-commerce that was dependent on advertising, and we were the platform. We weren't a brand. Part of that experience was involving Amazon's emergence, and it became clear operating that business that Amazon was just beating all of the other marketplaces and websites that did e-commerce. With that background in e-commerce, the three of us decided that we wanted to launch a brand on Amazon, since Amazon was winning the war of acquiring customers to their platform. And with some pretty heavy scar tissue on acquiring customers, the idea of being able to tap into free is probably not the right word, but very affordable customer acquisition on Amazon was very appealing. And if you can set up the right listing on Amazon, then you get all of this earned placement and more or less free traffic. You kind of have to figure out how to create LTVs after you get that first purchase. So anyway, we started the business more with a channel mindset than like a product idea. So we tested 5 different products starting off and trusted our ability to figure out what is worth going all in on, and we ended up going all in on vacuum insulated drinkware. So that was really how it started. I would say the last 8 years has been us figuring out how to interpret data, how to learn how to create defendable advantages with a brand. We don't have any intent to sell the company. We intend on running it as long as we can. We get excited about creating value and creating a brand that is unique and something that has a lot of intrinsic value. That was a long answer, but that's kind of...
No, I love it. There's so many facets there and so many things building this company, like you said, 8 years ago to where you are now. A lot of that, like I said, I already said a plug for LinkedIn, but you definitely share a lot of there, and I know you're very active on Twitter as well. So I highly recommend, because you share more than just the subject that we're going to talk about today. But really what had me initiate this conversation was, I think it was someone else had posted, and I wish I could remember who the post was. They had tagged you and basically had referenced a Twitter thread you had made. You'll have to give me the timeline on how old that was, because I know you'd said that there was an update since then, and we'll definitely get into timelines in this discussion, but it was centering around completely shutting off ads on Amazon for a time.
Yes. We're coming up on about a year ago whenever we decided to do that, and I posted this thread on, we've spent $10 million on Amazon ads historically, and we're completely shutting it off. It was kind of an indefinite shut off just to see what would happen. It made a lot of people mad. It made seemingly a lot of like college professors really happy who don't trust incrementality of advertising. So it was interesting to see just like how that resonated with different people. I can dive in a little bit on that subject if that's cool.
I'll definitely have some questions leading up to it. I mean, what caused me to reach out is because I get this question a lot from brands. The question of, am I getting the return I need? Is this necessary? You know, as profit margins get squeezed, as you saw in previous business, you know, customer acquisition as it increases, it definitely creates large challenges for brands. And even as somebody who, like I said, I mean, like I own and run an Amazon advertising agency. So it's not in my best interest to tell shoppers or brands on Amazon like, hey, completely shut off your ads, but I love getting the context to the opposition. And one of the things I was really interested to dig into in our discussion is kind of the thought process and where you were at and what caused you to really make that jump. Like, what were you seeing as you looked at that? What gave you the confidence to be able to say, even though we're spending extensively, we feel like shutting this off is going to give us a better, the pros definitely outweigh the cons?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say, just starting off, that like I mentioned, the goal of our brand has been to create a company or product that gets earned placement, organic placement, is like our primary KPI. That's really, I think, different than a lot of other Amazon sellers and Amazon brands. So I acknowledge that, and that like this strategy is not for everyone, for sure. What we saw, to create a brand that competes well in generic search, you can't have significant margins. You have to be passing that along to customers, and we're bootstrapped. We've never taken outside fundings. We have to use our profit to fund our inventory build. That was really one of the key contributors, is that like we were growing despite advertising. If we're advertising just to go out of stock, well, that's not incremental sales. Because you're missing out on organic sales while you're out of stock.
Yeah.
And we have been strapped for cash this entire time. We view our advertising budget more as an investment of capital than something that we have to do. So we could spend on Amazon advertising, we could invest in more products, we could launch new products, we could hire more people, we could buy machinery, which we've started domestic manufacturing. So we view it as one of those buckets. And so I think that's probably a helpful context to understand like why we would do that. We just felt like there were better investments during that time. And we were also skeptical. Our understanding of advertising, at least like sponsor products advertising, I think was probably lagging like where we were as a company. We just intuitively saw that our ad budgets did not fully correlate to increases or decreases in revenue. And we didn't fully understand like branded search versus competitor versus generic, and spending in a way where not just like Amazon ads is going to give you great, performance numbers, but you see it in like additive sales. That's what led up to us making the decision to let's just see what happens when we don't do it at all.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on two things probably just defining one a little bit more, and then a question on kind of what you were seeing in the data on the other. The first one was when you mentioned earned placement. I kind of have an idea what you mean, but for sellers tuning in, they might not quite comprehend like what all that entails. I'd love to have you expand on that concept a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Earned placement is really, I would say, simply where the algorithm decides you have earned to place on a search page. The keyword Tumblr is one of our bigger ones, and the algorithm essentially ranks us according to the competition for the relevancy of that keyword Tumblr. Which listing is most likely to get bought by a customer, essentially. It's just how the algorithm sees your relevancy for certain search terms.
Yeah, so definitely, you mean just being able to, just through the listing, obviously we're not talking about ads here because you weren't running ads, but to be able to have a listing that's going to send all the positive signals, meaning you can't phone it in on your listing. You can't, if you're going to not rely on ads, you definitely have to have other things propping up your search page placements.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And really, it's a combination of what percent of customers can you get to actually click into your listing that's organically ranked, and what percent actually buys that goes into your listing. Simply put, if you're the highest among your competition, then Amazon's going to show you the highest because they're incentivized to do so. There's a quote by Jeff Bezos from like 2010 that I always find hilarious, that like advertising, and this is like very simply put, probably overstated, but advertising is the price you pay for inferior product. So if you can't earn the placement, you have to like kind of pay to get shown.
Yeah.
And the irony there is that Amazon's totally sold their soul to advertising since that statement, and they're like the third biggest advertiser now.
Yeah. Although in their case, in this particular instance, it's definitely working in their favor.
Oh yeah, it's very profitable for them.
Yeah, and then I'd love on the other one, when you said that you were noting that you were growing aside from the ads, what things were you evaluating that made you to be able to say confidently, okay, we feel as if we're growing without having to, maybe rely on ads so much?
Yeah, so we, in the period where we were scaling up as a brand, leaned on advertising very heavily. For us, the period where we were advertising the most, we were spending about 8% of our retail sales on ads, which for us was a lot and really eating into our profits. So kind of from that point, we started scaling back advertising, and we didn't really see any drops in organic placement. By doing that, kind of throughout the history of the company, we've always been launching new products, whether it's new ornamentations, new colors in a listing that already exists, or adding another listing that is going to spur on growth. Essentially, our goal is to capture as much market share with a new listing as possible within the first 2 years of a launch. So if that's our goal, then that fundamentally means within 2 years of launching a product, we're going to kind of cap out its growth, and we're going to have to be stacking on like additional listings to continue growth. So that's really what our playbook has been, and that's what was driving the growth kind of leading into this period where we turned off ads. And it's a lot of where, I was talking about our investment dollars, a lot of them go into new products. So that's where we decided to prioritize new products over running ads.
Got it. That's really interesting. I love that layer of context. So you would say, it seems like, it's not as if you had one hero product that, your sole business is relying on this. And then, if this product is not sustained, even when we pull back on ads, then, we're really in deep water. You are really like broadening, kind of hedging your bets, making sure you're continuously reinvesting in new products, things that as you get the data back from the market, okay, we feel like this, the market's going to react well. And that was how you were expanding. It wasn't, I need to continuously grow this one product year over year, and if I don't remain competitive, I'm kind of screwed.
Right, exactly. Our goal right now is essentially to have one listing that can be highly relevant for essentially every keyword in drinkware. We're not really into glass yet, but we don't want to have competing listings for the water bottle search term. For example, we would rather focus all of the potential Simple Modern customers on one listing and make that the highest converting listing it can be. We don't really want to compete with ourselves or have to use like ad dollars to maybe merchandise two listings on one keyword that are competing. Something interesting that we experienced was we can see Amazon not allowing us to be a monopoly on a keyword. In 2019, we had 3 or 4 listings, like water bottle listings on page 1, highly ranked of water bottle. And overnight, like the algorithm changed to where it was basically just one. They were clearly like capping out our brand share for that search term, which makes a lot of sense because Amazon doesn't want one brand to own an entire search term. That's not in their best interest. So that was pretty fundamental for our strategy of we're not going to get to 80% market share on the water bottle search term. They're just not going to allow it. So let's have one listing that can get, I think we do like 6% of the market share on that one keyword, and then go after other keywords where we can actually drive more growth through like organic sales. And I say that. We do spend on ads right now, so we're...
Yeah. And I know we're a little ways in, so we'll definitely get to the, okay, everyone's knowing, like, as we set this whole, context and prerequisites and qualifying section, I'd love to get into, you said you obviously shut off ads, but I would be curious to know the process. You kind of hinted at it as it seems like you pull back. So was it tomorrow we go in and just pause everything? Was it incremental? Like, how did you go cold turkey? Did you dip your toe in? What did that look like?
Like I mentioned, the height of our ad spend, we were spending about 8% of our retail sales on ads. We had scaled that back some and kind of played around with turning certain campaigns off, prioritizing other campaigns, and we just got to the point where we just wanted to see what would happen if they totally went away. Because we had some theories around what would happen, and we didn't think it was going to be that detrimental to our business. We're very much about testing, and you can always turn the campaign back on. So, like, why not just see what happens if they go away? That was kind of our experience.
Cool. Okay, so you go in, you shut everything off. What were you watching for? What were you kind of looking to see if this is going to be a positive or what the result of the experiment was going to be like? And then I guess kind of, maybe the first couple weeks, what happened?
Really, the 2 main things we were looking at is really our run rates in terms of how listings were doing year over year, how they're doing versus our forecasts. Of course, you would expect some drop off, not doing any advertising at all, and there was. But also, like we expected, there was not the drop off that Amazon ads would have told us there should have been had, all of their sales been truly incremental. So it was somewhere in between. We knew that, like placement-wise, there was going to be a lag or a delayed impact on our organic placement if there was going to be an impact. We had ads off for about 4 months to allow the system to kind of naturally drift to where we thought the resting place would be for like how our performance would be without ads. That was really our experience, and it hurt certain listings differently, which I definitely was a key learning for us. Like, we have some listings that simply do not need any ads. Other listings, we are for sure losing out on revenue by not having ads. And kind of our new strategies based on like those observations of seeing, I think in a way, how much product market fit we have for each listing. If you have perfect product market fit, then that's where you don't really need advertising, but that's a pretty rare thing a rare type of listing to be able to create.
Yeah, when you said that's kind of how you look at your advertising strategy now, are there any key distinctions that you're able to see that tell you kind of which bucket a listing would fall into?
Yes. So the things that we look for in terms of assessing how much ad spend we want on a listing are how much competition there are for that product. Like on the generic terms, are there other formidable competitors that are like our product? Our best-selling tumbler, a pretty unique design. We have other water bottles that look similar to competition. We've learned that if there's more competition taking market share, that's an area where on generic search we should be spending. If there's competitors at higher margins that are large brands like Yeti or Hydro Flask, and we have a product that could flip a customer, that's our favorite type of ad spend. We currently have a product that really, we're biased, but we think it's a better form of the tumbler that Stanley has that has a handle on it. It's really popular right now. And we're $10 cheaper than Stanley. And like our best campaigns are running on competitor terms because we're not getting those sales if we don't run run those ads. They're fully incremental. We fully believe that. We're acquiring a customer because they're not searching for us. They're searching for someone else specifically. So that's our favorite type of ad spend. And then branded, we've learned, is for us at least, we need to get like a 30 ROAS for it to feasibly be profitable. But we naturally, almost all of our branded searches, the sales go to our listings because we are low margin. There's not ways for our competition to really have an advantage on our search terms with how we're set up offer-wise.
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of goes back to something you mentioned earlier on, you all seeing kind of being able to pass, like you said, pass on profits, to customers in the form of, just having really competitive pricing. It sounds like plays a big part in your strategy.
Yes. I think in some ways, giving margins away to customers is like kind of a form of an ad budget. One really interesting anecdote is that our contribution margins are not that different than Yeti's. They're a public company, so we can see their financials, and they're about double our retail price, but they have just enormous marketing budgets. And once you account for all those costs, we end up in a similar place. So I think, like I said, in a way, our ad budget is just giving like a high value proposition to customers.
Cool, I love it. So you kind of touched on, you were waiting those 4 months for things to kind of equalize, and you were noticing maybe some listings were faring more than others as far as like the market share on certain main keywords, etc. And I know you hinted at, okay, so we are running some ads now. It seems like you've kind of come back from that. What were you looking at after those 4 months? And what did the decision process look like of maybe we should retest again?
That's a great question. So in the middle of the summer, around Prime Day, when I decided to start testing again, our run rates through the summer typically are very flat. It's a good time of year to test where there's not going to be noise in a data set. It should be clear if we start advertising again the impact that it's going to have. So I started with campaigns that I thought would be truly the most additive to our business. There are some competitors for our water bottles that I started with running some campaigns on again, and pretty immediately it was obvious that running those campaigns we were able to profitably spend and see the lift in revenue. More or less started by kind of like layering back on campaigns to see what it did to our total revenue for that listing, and see what it does for our placements. That time of year is right before back to school, and we have like the top kids water bottle listings. So certainly with that time of year, it's like back to school and Q4 are our two biggest times. It made sense to try and position our listings organically and with ads like in the best possible way to hit back to school. So that was kind of like the secondary. And then we just kept adding back on, branded being the very last. Really at this point, to run Amazon ads in-house, I've learned that you have to have a list of assumptions of what you believe about advertising to be able to say what you think is true and run your ad campaign based on those assumptions. And you have to constantly be testing your assumptions. Like right now, we turned off all of our branded ads on Sunday because we're testing what we think is like the incrementality of those. So we have a document where we like kind of state what we think is true about Amazon ads, and that's what our team uses to run our ads on. And that's really from turning ads back on, like kind of that document started of like, well, we don't think it went great the first time around, so let's try and figure out what we believe about ads and be like constantly testing those things and refining it over time. But at this point, we're back to about 4% of our retail sales being spent on ads. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's definitely not what we used to spend.
Well, it's half.
Yeah, and I've heard of sellers spending like 20% of sales, which I'm sure works, but it's just a very different experience than what we had.
Yeah, it's a very different approach. And just to clarify, when you said it wasn't going as well before, from my understanding, that was you talking about when you were doing the 8% and when you were being more aggressive. It wasn't when you turned things off.
Yes, and by not going well, I just mean I don't think that we were very efficient with our ad spend.
Got it. So when you're turning them back on, it sounds like you were almost looking at it from a individual product perspective versus like, okay, we need to do everything. It sounded like very incremental, like highly specific tests.
Yes, absolutely. And we have different ways of evaluating different listings and deciding what type of ad budget they need. I mentioned earlier level of competition, the amount of kind of higher margin competitors that you could run ad campaigns on their keywords. Our two buckets, a few other qualifiers are we do about 20-25% of our sales through licensed products. so either Disney or fan shop. And licensed products, I think, is a great area for advertising because you do most of your sales off less relevant keywords. Like our biggest keyword for the NFL is Dallas Cowboys. We're competing against like oven mitts and all sorts of random stuff.
Yeah.
Especially in December, we are able to sell a lot on Dallas Cowboys because they're gifts. But organically, it's very hard for us to just rank highly. That's a good example. And then I think another interesting one is like Frozen toys, the movie Frozen. Frozen toys. We can actually drive quite a bit of sales off that keyword. And like our product is not a toy, it's a water bottle.
Yeah.
But we've learned that like parents who have kids who like the movie Frozen, their kid needs water bottles to go to school or, go anywhere. And so they're highly likely to buy our product. It's hard for us to get that ranking against like a Frozen Lego set, but it's an area where we can use ads in a pretty incremental way. So licensing is a great use case. Maybe less relevant, but still we can convert well on those keywords. And then I think finally, just new listings, it's helpful for us to advertise just to get, like, if we can't organically rank well yet, paying for placement is definitely something that we're willing to do.
When you're vetting new products, you almost also use just kind of getting that initial visibility to, like you're saying, vet the listings, kind of figure out, where they're going to fall within the market instead of hoping and waiting for someone to run across it elsewhere.
Absolutely. And as the listing matures, we won't pay more than 5% of retail sales in ads. If we have to do that, then to us, that's a sign that we need to improve our offer. We need better colors. We need to maybe stop selling it. It's just like not resonating well with customers. So certainly, I would say for a listing, we kind of cap it out at around 5% of retail sales for an ad budget.
Got it. Just going back and just kind of me as an advertiser wanting to kind of ask the geek out question on when you said that you were using the licensing to get placements on, that makes perfect sense for me, like toy pages or, gifts or just generic Dallas Cowboys. When you're running those ads, are you running them for profitability? Are you running them for market share? Are you running them to try and get that organic placement that Amazon might not get you otherwise?
That's a good question. At this point, I think that I've resigned myself to thinking we could get placed well all year round on some of these keywords. During gift buying season, it's possible for us to rank top 10 just on like Disney as a keyword. That's happened before, but we've learned that as you get out of season, products that aren't gift items tend to fall off, and other items replace it that are more seasonal for that time of year. Yeah, to answer your question, there are keywords that I think year round we're willing to spend on it and kind of view that as like the best form of market share that we can drive on that type of keyword. I think part of your question was about customer acquisition.
Yeah, I guess that's what I would, like I said, marketer brain, kind of wondering is, are you seeing that organic placement off of running those ads? Is that what you're after? If you're not seeing that placement, are you running them like ROI conscious? I guess that was kind of what I was curious about.
Yeah, certainly we're very much like ROAS, ROI conscious. We don't want to be losing money on any sales. We don't really, in terms of like the traditional customer acquisition to LTV model, that's not really how we're approaching Amazon ads. I think part of that's because we are an omni-channel brand. We have products sitting in Target and Walmart that we view as customer acquisition. I will say like on competitor search, we do view that that's the most customer acquisition type spend that we have. But on generic terms, for the most part, we feel like our organic spots can't suffice customer acquisition, and we don't. It's hard for us to profitably run ads on those type keywords because whenever we account for what we think incrementality is, like our target ROAS is just too high to get the placements that we would want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. This has been great. I really appreciate you walking through all this. I just had one additional question on, you said you never want a product long-term to get over 5%. It sounds like brand level, you're targeting more 4%. And I know you said you definitely are evaluating individual products, which obviously you guys are really savvy at what you do. And that's what we find a lot, is that brands are going into their catalog and saying, okay, this is kind of the life cycle of this product and this is the life cycle of this product, and they really should be treating separately because in a lot of places the market is completely different. So lumping it all into one account level goal oftentimes doesn't like get you where you need to go, and I think that's what you've found. But I'd be curious to know, like, when you're evaluating that 5% and you had talked about some seasonality and maybe going after competitor search terms a little bit more during peak seasons, do you kind of view that 5% or 4% across a year span? Are you looking at that month to month? How are you evaluating and kind of like, I guess, leveling out those bumps where things might get more competitive?
Excellent question. It's an annual number, like an annual 5%. We have some listings that are so seasonal that our budget would be 2 clicks a day if we ran out of season. And so with some of them, we've learned that we should just not run ads except for that month or two out of the year where sales go crazy, and just use all of our budget there. It's just going to go further. A good example of that is really like a lot of our back to school product. Just crazy in August. There's a little bump after Christmas, and I feel like the springtime, back to school. But this time of year, it's just a waste of our time, and we'd rather save that budget for when it's a more relevant season.
Cool. Well, I appreciate all of this. I appreciate all the perspective. I love getting the opposite end of the spectrum, from us like running a lot of ads to running no ads whatsoever. And I really appreciate the context you've given to this whole discussion on, things you're doing to stay competitive, listing levels, pricing, and all the things that go into being able to effectively run a strategy like this without, obviously, it seems like you're not slipping on market share, which is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And really, I know that there's no really right and wrong. There's just different strategies that work for different brands on this topic. And we're still trying to figure it out. Like I said, we're still testing, and I know that there's ways where our mindset's off, but we at least want to be working toward as close to an accurate view of what we should be doing as possible. And at the end of the day, really our playbook is wanting to grow our branded search, like searches for Simple Modern, to be much of the sales as they can be, so we don't have to necessarily advertise for those customers, and it's a stabilizing force. So ultimately, that's our goal as a brand, and I certainly know that's not the path for everyone. But I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the perspectives you share. It helps broaden my view just outside of like our specific business. So
well, likewise. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. And I will definitely link your LinkedIn profile below. So as your perspective changes, sellers can definitely go check out and hear all the great things you have to share on growing business and Amazon in general.
Yep. Thanks a lot.